Juno was a young squirrel who dreamed too big for her own paws. Every morning she climbed to the edge of the great stone gap, past the jagged rocks, past the wind that howled like it hated small things, all the way to the tall pine grove on the far side. The other squirrels said that grove had nuts the size of stones and branches so wide you could sleep on them without ever falling. Juno believed it so hard that some nights she couldn't sleep at all. But every morning she stood at the same edge, looking at the same impossible stretch of empty air, and did nothing. Because how do you cross a gap that wide? You don't. Not in one leap. Not ever. And so, Juno's dream stayed exactly where it had stayed for a year. Enormous, glowing, and completely out of reach. "Your problem isn't that the far side is too far," said a rough voice above her one morning. "Your problem is you keep measuring the whole gap instead of the ground under your feet." It was Bram, an old crow who lived at the edge, slow in his walk despite his wings, and somehow the only animal in the valley who'd ever crossed and come back. "Nobody crosses this gap," Juno said. "It's too wide." "It was too wide," Bram said, "for the version of me that tried to fly it in one go. It was exactly wide enough for the version of me that stopped trying to fly it all at once." Bram led Juno down into the gap itself, where a thin stream cut through the rocks far below. And there, half buried in dust, Juno saw it. A bridge. Not grand, not built in one miraculous night. It was made of stones, hundreds of them, each one different, each placed by hand, one on top of another, stretching almost invisibly toward the far side. "You built this?" Juno whispered. "One stone built this," Bram said. "Then another. I never once built a bridge. I only ever placed a stone." Juno stared, and for the first time the gap didn't look like one impossible stretch. It looked like 1,000 small gaps, each one exactly the size of a stone. "How long did it take?" Juno asked. 3 years, Bram said, "and I never once thought about the pine grove while I worked. Thinking about the grove is what kept you frozen at this edge for a year. Thinking about the next stone is what gets a bridge built." Juno didn't believe it would work, but the next morning, instead of staring across the gap, she climbed down and picked up one small, gray, unremarkable stone. She set it at the very start of the empty stretch. Nothing happened. No thunder. No breakthrough. Just one stone where no stone had been the day before. But she came back the next day, not because she suddenly believed in the grove again, but because that lone stone looked incomplete without a second one beside it. So she placed a second, then a third. Weeks passed. Her paws grew rough. Some days the stone she placed was clumsy and had to be redone. Some days the wind knocked one loose into the stream below, and she started that section over. There was no glamour in it, no crowd watching, no sign from the sky that she was close. There was only ever the next stone. Then one afternoon, Juno looked up from her work and realized she could no longer see the wall behind her. The bridge stretched out farther than she remembered building it. She hadn't felt it grow. She'd only ever felt the stone in her paws. "This is the part nobody tells you," Bram said when Juno found him again. "You don't feel the bridge get built. You only ever feel the stone in front of you. The bridge is just what's left behind once you stop staring at the far side and start looking at your feet." "How much longer until I reach the grove?" Juno asked. Bram was quiet, then said the only thing that had ever been true. "Stop asking that. It's the same question that froze you for a year. Ask a smaller one. Where's today's stone?" Juno looked down. There, half buried in the dust, was one more stone, waiting. She picked it up. She placed it. The gap grew a little smaller. Months later, on an ordinary morning that felt no different from any other, Juno placed a stone and her paw landed not on rock, but on soft pine needles. She looked up, and the far side wasn't far anymore. It was simply here. The grove stood around her, exactly as promised, and she couldn't even say which stone had been the last one, because by then, She'd stopped counting, stopped waiting, stopped watching for the moment of arrival at all. That was the strange part. The crossing that once looked impossible had happened so quietly in such small pieces that there was no single moment to celebrate. Just one day, she was simply standing where she had always dreamed of standing. And that is the lesson Bram had been trying to hand her all along. A big dream doesn't get crossed by the size of your leap. It gets crossed by the number of stones you're willing to place when no one is watching and nothing feels like progress. The gap only stays impossible for as long as you keep measuring it whole. The moment you shrink your focus to just the next stone, the gap stops being a wall and becomes a bridge. One small, unremarkable win at a time.